You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Hey Jeepers, welcome to show 212 of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. I'm Kevin, the engineer, the guy who reads instructions, uses the right tool, and generally follows those instructions. And as I've said many times, if I choose not to follow the instructions, I know I'm responsible for what happens. Now, Mr. Giggle over there, who's snorting and laughing that I barely got him a chance to take in a breath before I started the show.
I am Scott. I am the guy that hit the record button and then forgot to decide who was going to do the show opening. That's why I'm laughing going, wait a minute, it's recording. Who's doing the opening? Hi, guys. I am the Scott, the slapstick parts guy, and I continue a mission to try and remember what my lines are in the beginning of this show. And I am sorry that we're late, guys. I apologize. It's my fault because the sun was in my eyes and shining off my bald head and blinded the International Space Station. But as always, we'll share what works for us and as well what didn't. It's always up to you to decide what you want to do with your Jeep. So please read those instructions and make sure that you please also follow them.
Yep.
Did I get it right that time?
And there'll be some reference. You were very close. You were very, very close, and that's okay. We haven't had a script for almost 8 years.
Yeah.
I think we used it for the first 6 or 7 shows, and we're like, who needs this piece of paper?
Exactly.
Have a little ecological sense there and not waste paper. We'll just wing it.
Exactly. Kind of like the band. Wait, no, that was... never mind. Moving on.
As Scott was saying, we apologize for missing the last show. However, there were extenuating circumstances. I was in Western Canada for a couple of weeks when we should have been recording, and the parts of Canada I was in, you only had moments of internet interconnectivity, when you crossed a town. Most of it was out in the Canadian Rockies. I took the Canadian Rocky Mountaineer train system that is a viewing train, one of the ones where you can sit in the train and watch the world go by from leaving from Vancouver and making a couple stops as we go across. And we made it all the way to Calgary with a combination of train and then actually some neat tour buses. And I just spent the last hour and a half showing Scott pictures and talking through it. I will tell you that it was one of those definite life events. It was just an incredible trip with my wife. And when people say, well, how much was it? Don't ask.
It's all about the smiles per gallon, not the miles per gallon.
It was that's one of those ouch. But, as I tell folks, if you have investments that suddenly pay out, and it's one of those type of investments that are what they call mandatory disbursement, Uncle Sam wants you to take it out so that he can get his taxes. And then what you do with it's up to you. You can put it back in or you can do whatever you want. And we decided to take a little bit of a windfall with a mandatory disbursement. A particular fund did extremely well in our retirement portfolio. And we put the basic money back, but the windfall paid for this trip.
There you go.
So, it was... I can't think about it too many times ago. We took a vacation that cost that much. Ouch. But it was worth it. It was absolutely fantastic. For those that follow the news, though, I will tell you that we were up in Jasper area of British Columbia and, forgive me, my Canadian friends, the next province over. But anyway, Alberta. Where the wildfires were. In fact, we were only running about 8 hours ahead of the wildfires. They advanced so quickly. And one of the places we stayed in Jasper, BC, the lodge was actually hit by the fires. 30% of the town, hearts and prayers out to those folks. They're still reconstructing. In addition to that, if you follow any of the Canadian news, I don't know how many you are, the Chilcotin River had a huge landslide block it off. And it took about 10 days for enough water to build up for then the water to push over and create a washout on it. And that went down to the Fraser River. And we were Now this we were several weeks ahead of that, but yeah, I'm looking at places going, yeah, we were there, and it's not there to be there anymore.
Yeah.
And so again, thoughts and prayers to anybody who has any connection to that part of British Columbia and Alberta. I'm sorry for your loss. It was a beautiful place. Hopefully that you can rebuild, and I know it won't be in our lifetime, but the forests will recover.
Yeah.
Having got over my little intercultural political statement, but it was a lot of fun to go there. Walk in the glaciers again. That's the second time that the wife and I have been up on glaciers. We've been on the Alaskan glaciers, and now we've been on the Canadian. And Scott, to go over the Canadian Continental Divide, it like parts of our Midwest, there's what they call a three-way point, and we were actually at the three-way point. It's one of those where water goes down. If the raindrop falls on the right side of this hill we're standing on, or this ridge, it goes to the Atlantic Ocean all the way across. Okay, if it falls on the other side, it goes to the Pacific Ocean. If it falls on that little notch up there, it goes all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. It's kind of cool to realize that you're in a place in Canada where, okay, if you drop water, in theory, it's going to either go north, east, or west. Sorry,
Nice.
South, you're out. Anywho, but it's good to be home. It's always good to be home and come home to, and I'm not exaggerating, folks, 18-inch to 24-inch deep grass.
It's fun being in Florida during the rainy season, isn't it?
Yes. And as I told Scott, I'm not making this up. I was raking my yard with a tractor bucket. And I'm not talking about a lawn tractor. I am talking about a compact, not a mini compact, but a compact tractor. One of those that about 43 horsepower and has a 5.5 foot wide bucket, And I was just skimming the lawn, rolling up the grass cuttings and then packing it. And I took 6 bucket loads of grass clippings off the front and over to the neighbor's cows and dumped them. And they enjoyed it. They were quite happy. Fresh grass.
Kevin the salad bar.
Yeah, pretty much a delivered salad bar for cattle. But anywho, we be back, and Scott has also had some challenges in his life, but that's just kind of the way life goes.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's putting it mildly. But again, it's one of those things. You keep moving on. You roll with the life's punches. You dust it off and tell life it hits like a sack of lemons. That's all you got, and then you just kind of push further and harder as you can. But. No, I get a lot of stuff in the parts mines, a lot of good stories from that situation. But I have decided to put the LJ up for sale. So the LJ is again yes, market adjusted price because when you get the laughing emoji, everyone's a critic and everyone's going to laugh at you no matter where you put it. And then you kind of step back and go, yeah, I'm asking for 2 to 3 years ago pricing. So yeah, let's take a step back and see what I really need, what I really got to get, and decide to put it back up. So again, it's one of those things. If it sells, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. I'm enjoying driving it as a daily at the moment, but. It's very interesting because Kevin and I talked about the AC with the giant heat box in the back. Of course, still haven't taken the heat box out yet, but I've decided I started when the opportunity presents itself, I back into the parking spaces at work that are shaded in the afternoon. I get out and man, everything's great. The inside of the Jeep doesn't feel like the mountains of Mordor, but or Flames of Mount Doom or whatever it was. But no,
you're there.
But it's interesting though because speaking of heat and all that, I came home the other day for a couple of weeks from work, and popped open the hood, because again the temp on the gauge is reading. You got hot once. I'm like, all right, let me make sure I don't need to top off a coolant or something here, and everything was fine. But I remember just how hot. I'm like, wonder how hot that computer's getting. I put my hand on. I'm like, whoa, that's boiling. And then I remembered because we just did an Avalon. The computer was in the bottom footrest area, and I'm like, you know what? Let me call our buddy Mark over at Wrangler Fix and ask him a question. And I said, hey, have you ever thought about having a relocation kit to put the PCMs inside the passenger compartment? And he's like, well, you don't really need to do that because he's market tested his PCMs for the past 5 years, and they have not had a thermal failure on any of their stuff yet. But me, being that constant guy of thinking, well, well, okay, but what if we could relocate it into the passenger compartment? So I brought that over to our resident engineer, and he's kind of like, that's something to ponder on. Of course, we just literally talked about it maybe 35 minutes ago, but it was one of those kind of statements and comments and questions that I've always thought, because again, depending on each manufacturer, Toyota puts those computers right in front of the bumper. Like literally it's bumper, absorber, rebar, and in between all that, your computer for some reason. I'm like, you get one good front end hit and you just lost all your ECM and wiring.
Where are they in a lot of the later Wrangler models? They're up on the driver's side on the battery.
Yeah.
Let's just make sure that not only does it take an impact, but it gets electrocuted in the process.
Yeah,
if it's dead, we want it really dead.
Yeah, splash with acid too, Speaking of melty. But no, I just kind of brought that up to Kevin. He was kind of like, that's kind of an interesting concept, I mean,
it is. I already figured out you could get a junkyard harness for your series of Jeep to make sure that the wiring, because you're going to need a lot more wire, and a single splice per wire would be arduous enough. I wouldn't want to cut them and try and extend them, because then you'd have, 60 red wires.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm not sure how much it would help or not help, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just kind of one of those.
I wonder if there's any ways, because I know everyone talked about the hood louvers. I'm just kind of putting the question out there for anybody. What have you done to help your underhood temperatures? I mean, again, some people, run without a hood. Well, you can do that, but unfortunately, if someone should get mowed over in your Jeep, they don't do really good in the fan blades.
No, and it actually doesn't help to take the hood off. It actually has been shown in many cases, not specific to the Jeep, but in many different cases, it actually raises component temperature to take the hood off.
Really?
Because, yes, the underhood is designed to utilize the underdraft. Let's call it vacuum. As you drive down the road, the air running underneath gets squeezed, and the higher velocity makes it have a lower pressure. So you're pulling in with the fan, and it vents out. It goes in past the heads, over the exhaust manifolds. There's actually an airflow direction down and out the belly. That's why you have all that thermal insulation from the factory that most people take out when they rhino line the interiors. And all that heat is supposed to go carried out and wasted out behind the vehicle as it's moving. And people are like, oh, well, heat rises, so I'm going to punch holes in the hood. Yeah, okay. That also takes all that air that normally would have gone down and washed over the exhaust manifolds and downpipes and the precats, right up there under the carburetor, and now sends it up through the hood and doesn't give it any way to get out, So, and I'm not saying it can't work, but it's not as simple as people think it is. Simply put that way. There are challenges to heat management many times over what is apparent. We think of, well, if my fan pulls air through the radiator, my Jeep's fine. Tain't necessarily so.
Yeah.
That's just simple. There's a whole science to that. It's the biggest challenge in engine swaps. It's not fitting. It's not wiring. It's cooling. Mm-hmm. Because we wedge in, LS, Hemis, 4BTs, whatever you think of, in a place it was never designed to fit. And then we wonder why it overheats. So, and I'll get off that little step stool.
No, and that's a fair. And it's funny you talk about that, because at work the other day we had a situation where a vehicle came in and they needed light bulbs, and because the owner had put the cheap LEDs from Amazon in them, and there's the economy LEDs, and then there's a really cheap one, Temu style LEDs. Okay, yeah. And they bought the Temu style ones, and of course none of their turn signals were working, and I had to order the front turn signal bulbs, and the technician's like, "Well, why do you got to do that? It's just a regular, single filament amber bulb. You don't need to do that." And I said, "Man, there's a part number there for a reason." So I looked at my catalog and it said 28 8-watt. So I said, well, one side of the thing is 28 and the other side's 8-watt. He's trying to muffin stuff a bulb in there, and I'm like, man, there are reasons There are different part numbers.
Yeah.
There are reasons for some of these things. And again, I know some of it may not make sense, but yeah, like you said about the hoods and all that, there's reasons for this. And
there really is. When you get into TIPMs and whatever every other manufacturer, like the Flapping Penguin, calls their electronic relay panels now, and they do exactly what you're talking about, is that they are looking to keep costs down, the cheapest they can get it, so they can have a good profit. And you know that if they can squeeze a smaller wire in by using a 7-watt on this side, but you need to have the 10-watt on that side, that's what they're going to do. And then you go and put in a regular incandescent bulb, which is whatever wattage, you know what I mean? So, and gee, it fried things. Or when you put the wrong bulb in, you know. I still laugh because I was watching more information online about people who didn't understand the concept that an LED, you know what LED stands for, right, Scott?
Light emitting diode.
And what's a diode?
Yes.
That's what I thought. A diode.
Wait. A diode.
Is an electrical.
I do know what this means.
What?
It was an iode that died.
Not quite.
Give me an eye for effort.
It's a one-way gateway for electricity.
Okay.
All right. You can't, if you wire it backwards, it doesn't work. And not only, it literally stops current flow.
Okay.
So that's what a diode is, okay? That's used in the electronic world to make sure that power only goes one way, not backwards. Well, this just happens to put out light. So they put it in a glass lens and said, there you go, or plastic lens in a glass housing or whatever. And there you go. You got a very efficient light bulb. Good. Really great. So if you try to use it in the infamous, we've talked about it before, wig-wag turn signal marker lights on Wranglers up through 06, it'll work in one mode but not the other. Or you can turn it around and work in the other mode, not the first one, unless you do some crazy stuff like somebody you know. So they're getting so detailed now on vehicles and machines out there that, you really have to understand. You got to do some research and make sure what you're going to do even is feasible. Because there are now states coming out. I just was reading a press release, that there are quite a few states that are shifting away from the federal rules about engine swaps. Now, for those that have listened to the show for a while, you know that we talked years ago about the original federal rules for engine swaps. And you always had to keep the emissions level commensurate with the year of your engine. All right. However, now some states have caught on that there's a loophole in that. What if you use an older engine in a newer car? Does that mean you can throw all the emissions away? So now I believe it's something like, I don't know, 20 or 30 of the states have already adjusted their DOT regulations on engine swaps, that it's the newer, the emissions must meet the newer of the two choices for the body or for the engine. And that doesn't sound like anything to most people. They go, well, that doesn't matter. Well, yeah, it does. There's a whole subculture of people that were going backwards with engines so that they could get away from the emissions. And that's no longer going to work. And it's heading for a federal level approval. So it might be another 2 to 5 years, given the way the federal government works. But, something to keep in mind. The other thing that I've heard about that's coming up is with all of the intelligent cruise controls and smart driving cars, have you heard about the ones that are going to have automatic speed control?
Is this the one with the Ford ones?
Well, it's several of them have done it, where they can actually, either through the GPS mapping or through sign recognition, and will actually either A, pull throttle on you, B, there's about 4 or 5 different rulings. Right now, it's big in the UK. It's going to go hot in the UK. Well, actually not United Kingdom, in the EU. I'm sorry, the European Union is going to have Uncle Sam, or I'm sorry, Big Brother is going to start regulating, and you won't be able to speed, or it will automatically report you.
Yeah, those Toyota safety sensors that way. When you drive there, it recognizes the speed limit, and it'll show you your speed limit sign on the dashboard. And if you go over that, it puts a red box around it. And I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
Some people now.
Nanny state.
Go ahead.
Nanny state coming to fruition.
Well, a lot of times, like I'm with Allstate Insurance, and they have you can set up a DriveWise app that will basically report how you drive. I refuse to sign up for it because one of the Facebook groups was a guy was riding with his friend, and his friend they were in a Scat Pack Challenger, and he was doing over 130 miles an hour, and of course he got the flash from his phone saying you unsafe with speed. Report. Use a button you can hit saying that wasn't me, but guess what? To prove that wasn't you, you have to put down all the information on that car that you were in. And Ford, again, I haven't, so please, if I'm spreading misinformation, I apologize. The reason why I asked about Ford stock took a hit because they're apparently, like if you're driving your Fiesta and someone in a Mustang flies past you, it will basically, because it's Ford on Ford, kind of very similar to how the Apple AirTags work. AirTags work, but they have to be close to another Apple device for them to register and whatnot.
Cars will squeal on each other.
Yes, basically the camera that's used for the cruise control on your because if you gotta look at your rearview mirror, guys, there's a lot of cameras there now. They will snap a picture of that tag and. That I'm just kind of like, what? No, young Bucky. But like you said, that things are going that way, and that kind of scares me. And the other interesting thing, before I forget it, is when you talked about them using wiring and all that. I said something to a technician who's having a house built, and he raised an eyebrow and went, "Oh my God, you're right." Well, Toyota introduced the new the 4-cylinder turbo. Okay, they're putting it in everything from the Tacoma to the 4Runner to even the Land Cruiser. 7,000-pound vehicle on a 4-cylinder turbo.
Yeah.
Us from the 80s, I know technology is different. That's a lot of vehicle for a 4-pop turbo. There's a question of longevity. But more importantly, when I brought this up to my tech, he goes, sometimes cars ain't made like they used to be. I said, well, of course not. Do you realize that you're a manufacturer now? It seems like they almost adopted the code compliance, like when you're building a house, because as Kevin has said in the past, code is bare minimum. So manufacturers are just basically kind of building your car like the code on your house, the bare minimum to get you through that warranty so you can buy another car, the newer technology and the new tattletale technology, and they almost don't want you to rebuild your old vehicle again. So I'm looking.
They absolutely don't. I mean, there's a window of service life where they want you to pay for service and parts. That's part of the economy of the automotive business, as I'm sure you know. But there's also a degree of, I believe, and this is just a personal belief, of planned obsolescence. There's a full idea that you're going to need to buy a new vehicle, and that's a plan. And fortunately for them, those of us that have the skills to keep the old ones running and or resurrect really old ones are going to be the outliers in that, and we'll be a very small percentage. I just hope we're small enough to stay under the we got to get the government to do something about those guys level.
And welcome to Tinfoil Hat Talk. This is Tinfoil Hat Talk. This is Scott. No, but it's interesting you talk about the planned obsolescence because, again, I see it in all day long. And one of the biggest things that people tell me, and I've heard this now starting to be said in my showroom, is, well, wait a minute, it's not supposed to break. It's a Toyota.
Yep.
I'm like, guys, I'm in the parts room. I'm ordering the parts, and I can tell you this right now that just because it's new doesn't mean it's bulletproof. Yep. And I have friends at the Chrysler dealership, same problem. I ordered Mercedes air filters for a 2024 Mercedes the guy just traded in. $800 a piece at O'Reilly's, and the car takes two.
Yep.
I had the sales manager saying, "What's going on here? Why didn't you go aftermarket on these? And why are they $800? That's what it takes." Remember, for those who remember Ford Fiestas, they had the lifetime air filter. The thing was the size of a Magnavox 32-inch tube TV on this little 4-cylinder car, and it was a $500 air filter, and it was supposed to last the entire service life. I'm just like, wow, again, you just plant. I was always a guy that would always smirk when someone would say planned obsolescence. They mean to do this. I'm like, I'm starting to believe that a little bit. That's why my phone doesn't have an update on it. I have the red, please update me. No, you're going to kill my battery.
Well, the truth is there by definition is some degree of planned obsolescence in the design. And I don't mean that somebody is willfully sitting in the back room going, okay, if we only make them last 5 years, we can sell. Okay. And I'm not saying those discussions don't occur, but from an engineering perspective, if I built you the eternal Jeep, you couldn't afford it. All right. So manufacturers have to take and balance the cost to design, build, and sell a vehicle versus what the market can afford. If we wanted to, we could have every single Jeep since the World War II, hot dip galvanized frames, all components, out of a chromoly steel that's, or core 10, the self-rusting steel that will protect itself. And the bearings could be sized so that their service life was, 100,000 miles, and these kinds of things, but nobody would afford it. Even our own government, if you look back just at the history of the MB and GPWs, they were a disposable weapon, okay? They weren't designed to come home and be put back to use. They were designed to be scrapped, when they were done. And if one of them broke in the combat situation, you tossed a grenade in it and moved on and ordered another one. And that philosophy just has to be there. And it's a sad situation. What is the design life? The designers need to know that, okay, we are designing for 5 years, 3 years, 50 feet outside the showroom door, something along that line. And that drives everything from weight to bearing sizes, lubrications, steel thicknesses, if you even use steel, and it's kind of a toss up because, everybody's cost conscious too. So that's why you see plastic everywhere. Plastic was considered a godsend because it doesn't rust. I don't have to worry about it. I can mold it in colors. You remember when the first plastic bumpers came out in the 80s? They were kind of an aluminum bumper with a plastic trim, or an all plastic with aluminum behind it. Yeah. And it was considered absolutely fantastic because it went on quickly. It didn't require maintenance, but it had a finite lifespan because UV and plastic don't mix, ultraviolet light. And, I still remember how neat it was. My wife had it was an 86, I believe, Honda Prelude. And in the office parking lot, somebody had backed in, hooked her bumper with their bumper, and drove off and ripped the bumper skin off. And at that time, it was absolutely heartbreaking. But she went to she didn't call me. She just picked up the skin off the road, brought it back, threw it in the back of the car, and drove down to the Honda dealership where we'd bought it. And they looked at it and they said, "Oh, well, it's not that bad." And I think that time, it was like 87, let's say. They walked in there and they said, "Oh, well, we keep those in stock. They're all black." And so the guy was like, $52. And he walked out and snap, 3 screws, and we'll throw the old one away. Have a nice day.
Nice. Nice.
So
got to the trail dog checking in. No, it's kind of funny when we talk about, like, again, manufacturers and obsolescence and everything else, because Kevin and I constantly preach about calling manufacturers again with things, and this is where I'm going to shift gears, if that's okay with Kevin, because Kevin found something really
Use
cool.
the clutch. We don't want to grind them.
If you match the speed just right on some moving on. So it was funny because a few shows ago I talked about contacting the manufacturer. A person wanted to use spacers on their new Sequoia or adapters, and I contacted them. We took care of it. Well, we installed a lift on that customer's vehicle, and not the brand I would choose, and the customer is complaining how ride is rough. You know, it doesn't it doesn't handle well. It's a horrible ride. It traded it in, and so I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and now we're going through another situation where we're starting to upfit some vehicles, and including one of the new Land Crushers, and because we have more of those on our lot than we do Corollas, but and when I'm worried because I was basically told to order a lift for it, and I did as told, but I was just, again, knowing what I know, it's a sin. You know, they talk about ignorance is bliss, so is intelligence. Or ignorance is bliss and intelligence is a sin, because you realize that we're getting ready to put a very cheap lift on a very expensive vehicle, and it's going to happen all over again. And we were talking about spring rates, and that's when Kevin came up with something amazing. I'll let you switch gears here, Kevin, but man, that is really cool what they did, you know.
Yep. Well, you know, folks, we talk all the time to you guys about when you have questions, call the manufacturers, even before you purchase, and talk to their tech people. They really do put forth the effort to try and educate you. And to that end, I try that again in English, stumbled across something. And that is, and I'm going to first just start off with, I'm going to talk about Metalcloak. Now, we've done it before. They are not a sponsor. They are a friend of the shows, okay? And we've even had Madsen Beakley on, one of the head joint owners of Metalcloak, who is the active person in the management team. And one of the things is that they have a section, and I've known about it, but I just saw a new article, and I wanted to share where it is for you guys, because this tends to be a tech-based show, and the feedback we get is we like to know the tech. We like to learn the tech. And we've talked about lift kits over and over and over and over and over. And as Scott just mentioned, even outside of the Jeep world, we see the challenges. And one of the hardest things in the lift kit is understanding what the difference is. You see all these words, and what I'm going to get at is Madsen himself has published just recently in July, the end of July, so July 30th, 2024, an article in their blog page, and it's in their tech tips section, and it's on the Metalcloak website. If you go there, and they have this little, what do you want to call it?
I call it an
information image
tree
toolbar that's got, pictures of different grills, so okay, there's a JT, a JL, a JK, so you can click to it. It's like a little menu board. But the very first one is a little square box with the little pointy bottom that you'd usually see over a cartoon. It says blog, and blog is Metalcloak's little data dump area, and they have tech tips and other information and short theses and stuff like that. And they just published Coil Springs 101. As many times as I've talked about coil springs and the different types of coil springs, Madsen is the author on listing on it, and I'm sure he had help from his tech staff, because it's an outstanding read for those that are interested. It's a white paper, if you know what that means in the business world. And it's understanding suspension springs, their design, and why Metalcloak chose a specific type, okay? And it's got graphics that show movement, and it discusses pros and cons. He does not diss any of the other systems. He just thinks that theirs is superior. And it's a relatively short read. I would say it's probably, even with the pictures, no more than 2 pages long. I'd suggest, if you're buying a lift soon, if you want to upgrade your lift, if you know somebody who's getting a lift, this might be something worthy of a read and a reference for those people. And he basically talks about the 3 types of coil springs and uses the industry standard terms. As you know, if you have checked Metalcloak out, they sell a dual rate spring, which simply means there's 2 different spring rates. Spring rates, pounds per inch of deflection of the spring. How many pounds does it take to move the spring, squeeze it 1 inch? There's the industry standard that all the builders use, or the car builders, manufacturers, and that's a linear rate spring, and that's just a a straight wind, nothing special, and the rate just keeps piling up as you squish harder and harder. And the other big buzzword in the industry right now is either variable rate or progressive rate springs. Okay. And Madsen talks about the pros and cons of each one of those systems. Obviously, linear rate's cheap, easy to build, doesn't take a special computerized winding machine to take the hot steel. And if you ever want to see a neat video, Google making a coil spring.
That is cool, though. I will
it is
admit
cool to watch that.
I'll second that. That is cool.
And he talks about some of the challenges. A progressive rate spring can be very good in certain types of vehicles. Not so hot for off-roading, okay? Even though it's sold as the end, because each coil is basically 1 to 2 coils are one rate, then the next 2 are a different rate, or 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2. And so you end up collapsing a bunch of your spring down in certain situations, and the ramp up, the variability of the rate can lead to either a sudden stop or a really harsh rebound. He goes into depth on that so that you can look at it and say, well, what do I want? Okay. Linear rate's cheap. All right. It's cheap to make. It's cheap to replace, relatively speaking, these days. Dual rates, it's like 2 single rate springs. And the key that makes Metalcloaks dual rate different than others is they put the soft rate on top, not on the bottom. And pretty much it stays closed under normal driving. It doesn't come into play until you articulate and flex hard. And then it starts to open up to keep the spring in the pocket. But the lower section works with the firm single rate, similar to a stock spring. Okay, so you maintain what I would consider the closest to a stock ride. And that's my opinion, not his. Well, maybe his, I don't know.
Call him and ask.
But,
Say call him and ask.
Call him and ask. Yeah. They're all, supposedly tuned. Of course, you'll find manufacturers that go really cheap that would lift kits that don't even tune their springs. They just order them at a certain spring rate and they get what they get and they throw it in the box. I think it's a great read, and I'm not going to repeat it to you over the whole situation, but he talks about the action, what happens both under compression, when you're landing or hard braking or something like that in the front end, or during extension, when you're articulating and you're actually drooping your axle. How do you keep it from popping out? Do you have to use clips, or is a spring capable of going until the shock catches it and stops the axle from falling up? I've been on rides more than a few times with people who were doing some pretty hard articulation. All of a sudden you hear this, oh, everybody stop. Joey lost a spring. It just literally flexes over and blows a spring out. And you have to, don't back up, don't move, Joey, because if you do, you've got no spring in there. You're going to crush your shock. And you run over and you go, okay, where did this spring go?
Yeah.
Hopefully not over the cliff.
Yeah.
I think the worst case we had was about down a 60-foot embankment that we had to go pull it back up. And then everybody's waiting as somebody hiked down the hillside to bring the thing back up and then tries to force fit it. And that's one of those where you kind of have to look the other way sometimes from a safety perspective, because when you're in there with the jack handle trying to stress the spring and pop it in so that he can get off the trail.
You were there, the infamous Lazy Springs mud trip. Daryl and Brisky. Remember when Daryl lost his spring?
Yes, I remember.
We were behind it, and we heard the bling, ding, ding, ding. And it was like, stop!
Down it went.
And there, ding, 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 ding. Luckily, it was just a big dirt hill, but still, it was kind of like, and of course.
Yeah, but if he'd moved another foot forward to load that back up, he'd have flipped over because he had no support on that right front corner.
And I still remember Bob to this day. Daryl, you didn't install the spring keepers yet? Where are they? In my garage. Like a lot of good they do you now. So I don't know if you were there, but they got the spring there, ratchet strapping.
Oh, no, I was there. That was one of the ones. That was one of the ones. The other one was
sketchy.
And one time was also up in Georgia.
Yeah.
Sure. So, it's kind of an interesting situation. But anyway, it's a really good discussion, and even though he has a favorite, obviously the one he sells, the write-up is neutral enough that you can read it, you can understand it, and then you can go back and look at the different springs that you may be buying, either kit-wise or individual components, and make a determination about what works for you.
Yeah.
If it's Metalcloak, hey, great for Madsen. You know, he loves the business. But if it's something like a stock replacement, go see some guy like Scott in the parts department in the back of a dealership. You know, all of those are available. I just saw a chortle out of him.
No, it's funny. It's in the back of the dealership, kind of like how I got the steel Rubicon bumper from Jerry. Moving on. So.
Yeah. So I think it's a great read, and it's got some neat pictures, and it's got some nice charts that kind of give you an idea. Like they're talking about one of the spring rates here that, you know, if you have 2 inches of spring compression at a spring rate of 25 pounds per inch, you're going to take 2 inches off, obviously, and your force when it's compressed will be 50 pounds because it's 2 times 25. And then you go up to the next one is 25, which at 4 inches gives you 100 pounds of compression. And it kind of makes you understand what the spring is doing and how much force. It actually helps me drive to know how far down did my nose go? Was I hitting the brakes that hard to load the front suspension?
Right.
Or that time up in Pennsylvania when I came off the one hill for the descent, and all of a sudden my rear suspension went to full lock on extension, you know, because all the weight shifted onto the front. And I'm like, okay, now I am driving with 3,000 pounds on my front axle, which means I got 1,500 on each tire, more or less. Don't hit the brakes because you don't want the rear end to come visit the front.
What is it? Took us over tea kettle?
Yeah, that's a polite way of putting it. I won't, So, again, it's the Metalcloak website. That's metalcloak.com. And you'll see on the little header, go to the blog. And then in the blog, you can look up the listing for dual rate versus progressive versus low. It's a coil spring 101. And it's a really good read to understand what your suspension, how it works and how it can work. And don't blame me if you decide you have to call Will and order new springs.
But if you do order, tell them that we sent you.
Yeah, well, that's fine. You can do it. So, and Madsen, if you're tuned into this one, awesome article, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks. We appreciate any of the information. And there's all kinds of subjects. You know, he talks about control arm bushings. He talks about miles per gallon or gallons per mile. Think about that one.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and then they've got trip reports and just all kind of different subject matter. He's got 4 frickin' pages of different things that are written by different people. Okay. Independent front suspension versus solid axle. What's the difference? It's a great tech library, as well as the usual sales stuff. Metalcloak announces asset acquisition of carbon gears and axles, expanding its, so you can get all kinds of background stuff too. So it's kind of a neat little page. And like I said, you get authors like Mike Ulrich, Madsen Beakley, Ryan Utah, Kledzik. I can't read it. I'm sorry. If Mike Upchurch. So it's not just one writer, although there's some repeating people. And it's a great resource. And guess what? Unlike everything else, it costs you nothing.
And it's comprehensive, like you said.
Yeah. So with that, we are both looking for to get back into projects for Jeeps. I mean, right now, the honest issue is it's been, it's hard to say this with a straight face, but it's true that Florida is hot and humid, but right now we're stupidly hot and humid. It's one of those that going out to cut the grass and to just sit on a ZTR and move my arms, I come in looking like I've been hosed down, and my wife tells me I need to be.
You remember Troy Martin, right?
Yeah.
You know the one guy that said winter is coming and he's holding a sword, brace yourself, winter is coming.
Yeah.
You realize we're having winter this week, right? It's supposed to get down to 93 on Saturday.
Oh.
So the memes right now for Florida are winter is coming on Saturday. It'll be 93.
Well, I'm looking forward to fall coming around again,
Yes.
sometime for the week of fall, the week of winter, and the week of spring, and then we'll be back to summer. But, folks, we also had fun here with Debbie.
Yeah.
And it's not Debbie Does Dallas, it's Debbie Does Florida. She just came in and washed our socks for us.
Dude, did you know the other day, yesterday I think it was the 20th anniversary of Charlie, Francis, Ivan, Jean?
How can I forget?
I know, but But yeah, 2004.
I'm sorry. I was one of the recovery people who came in here and moved in. I only lived in Tampa, but I moved into the Central Florida region, Kissimmee region, and didn't go home for 3.5 months doing Charlie Francis, Ivan Jean. And I was part of the crew that had to hunker down, after Charlie, Francis. We mobilized after Francis, and then we had Ivan come in, so I had to actually mobilize and move all of my people, some 400 people, up to Atlanta, and then Gene came in, and since I was based out of Mobile District, and guess where Gene did after she grazed Florida? Mm-hmm. She nailed Mobile, so I lost. So, yeah, that was a fun one. 4 months, 600 people trying to find out who had a roof left, who had a house left. That was not a fun year. No. Not a fun year at all to be in Florida. Anywho.
But we made it.
We made it. And I think at this point we probably bored people enough. I don't know.
Well, it is time for the afternoon announcements. Besides tater tots and Salisbury steak for lunch today, don't forget the Florida Trail Team Challenge. You only got a couple more days left to when we're right time to release the show to register. We also have Crom for the Fallen, the one with the Sheriff's Jeep, not Sheriff's Jeep Fest. Well, Sheriff's Jeep Fest is coming up. Not going this year, unfortunately. But we have
Smoky Mountain Jeep Invasion is going on next weekend.
Yes, and I'm trying. It's Jeepin' with Judd. That's what it is. Jeepin' with Judd coming up, and Jeeptoberfest also coming up. And so all those events are going to be really cool, as always. But again, as Kevin and I started the show out, hopefully, again, we're having the show out on the 1st. It's going to be Memorial Day weekend. Oh no, it's Labor Day weekend. I forget it. I always have my birthday weekend off. My birthday weekend is always a 3-day weekend because my birthday is the last day of this month. So, but with that, I think it's time we lock some hubs and put the Jeeps in 4 lows and hit the trail. What do you think there, Mr. Kevin?
I absolutely agree. I need to get the Jeep back out. The last thing I went to was Red Scorpion's Jeep Trivia Night at O'Brien's.
Gotcha.
And Ron and I got in an argument or two over some of his definitions, and he's just like, all right, next time you're on, when I set it up, I'll have you come and make the questions.
Well, I'm sure that's a great caliber of questions. I'm sorry, there's an inside joke there, guys.
Yeah,
there is. I just want to make sure. We love you, Ron. We really do. But with all that, guys, be good to each other. Stay dry, stay safe, and stay hydrated, especially if you're down here in the heat of Florida. But with that, I think we'll catch you guys on the 1st. Anything else, Kevin?
Nope, I think that's got it.
All right, guys, you have a fun one.
Bye.
Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.